He bullied Michael Jordan in high school, now he's homeless, and what MJ did stuns the world. The streets of downtown Atlanta had always been a rough patch of the city, known for its high crime rates and grimy sidewalks. But on this particular morning, there was something that stood out: a man sitting on the curb, his face weathered, his clothes ragged, but there was something familiar about him. Sam Ellis, an investigative reporter for a local news station, stood a few feet away, watching the homeless man. It had been years since he'd seen the man, but something about him triggered a memory, something that didn't quite sit right. Sam had been covering the underbelly of Atlanta for years, but this story seemed different. This wasn't just another homeless person, this man had a history. Sam's instincts were spot on. As he took a few more steps forward, he realized that this man, hunched over and alone, was Tony Matthews, once the star basketball player in their high school. The same Tony Matthews who used to bully Michael Jordan, the now legendary NBA player. Back in high school, Tony had been the guy who made other players fear him. He was popular, arrogant, and used his status as the best athlete to push others around, especially the shy, awkward Michael Jordan. Back then, no one could have predicted that Tony's story would take this tragic turn. Sam approached cautiously, unsure of how Tony would react. "Tony Matthews?" Sam called out softly, just loud enough for the man to hear, but not enough to draw attention from the other people walking by. Tony looked up slowly, his tired eyes meeting Sam's. "Yeah, that's me," Tony muttered, his voice a low rasp from years of living on the streets. Sam hesitated before speaking again, unsure of how to approach the situation. He had a job to do, a story to break, but he wasn't sure where to start. "I know you probably don't remember me," Sam began. "But I used to cover sports for the local paper. I remember you from high school. You were the guy who made Michael Jordan's life hell." Tony's eyes flared for a moment, a flash of anger before it quickly dulled into resignation. He looked down at his hands, rubbing them together, as if trying to rid himself of the memories. "I wasn't the only one," Tony said, his voice almost inaudible. "But yeah, I made his life hard. He wasn't anything special back then. Just some kid with a dream." Sam wasn't sure if Tony was trying to justify his actions or if he was simply resigned to his past. He chose to press on. "I'm writing a story," Sam explained. "I heard about you being out here, and it caught my attention. You used to have it all: popularity, a future ahead of you. What happened?" Tony's expression darkened, his gaze shifting to the ground. "I had my shot. But I wasted it. Injuries, bad choices, a big ego. I lost everything. Now I'm here. Homeless. Just trying to survive." Sam sat down next to Tony, careful to keep his distance but not so far that the conversation felt impersonal. "You know, there's a whole generation of people who still remember how you treated Michael Jordan. You were the one who mocked him, put him down every chance you got. But now, look where you are. What do you think he'd say if he saw you now?" Tony's face twisted in discomfort, and for a moment, Sam thought he might lash out. But instead, Tony simply sighed. "I don't know what he'd say. Maybe he'd be happy to see me like this. Maybe he'd be glad I got what I deserved. I don't know if I'd blame him." It was a surprising response, one that Sam hadn't expected. Most people would have justified their actions, tried to defend themselves, but Tony didn't. His voice was full of regret, but also acceptance. It was a tone Sam hadn't expected to hear from someone who once had it all. "Do you ever regret it?" Sam asked quietly, his voice softer now. "Every damn day," Tony replied, his eyes clouded with pain. "But it doesn't matter. Regret won't change anything. I did what I did, and now here I am." Sam nodded, sensing the weight of Tony's words. It was clear that Tony had never found peace with what he had done, but it was also clear that he had no idea how to fix it. His past mistakes were like a shadow that clung to him, no matter how hard he tried to shake it off. Sam paused, trying to think of a way to push the conversation forward. "You know," Sam began slowly, "I'm guessing that no one's reached out to you. No one's tried to help you get back on your feet." Tony chuckled darkly. Why would they? I had my shot. No one owes me anything. But Sam wasn't so sure. He had heard whispers of Michael Jordan's soft side, the one he kept hidden from the public. The one who did things in private, things that no one ever knew about. Sam was a journalist, and his instincts told him there was more to the story. I think you're wrong, Sam said, his voice taking on a new urgency. I think someone has reached out to you. Someone who's been paying attention. Tony's brow furrowed, clearly confused. What do you mean? Sam didn't answer immediately. Instead, he let the silence stretch between them. He knew he was taking a risk. But there was something about Tony's story that didn't sit right. Something was missing. Sam had a gut feeling that Michael Jordan, MJ himself, might have played a part in Tony's redemption. But the question was why? Why would MJ, of all people, want to help the man who once tormented him? The reporter got to his feet, patting his jacket as if preparing to leave. I'll be in touch, Sam said, not giving Tony the chance to protest. As he turned away, his mind raced with possibilities. MJ was notoriously private about his acts of charity, but could he have actually reached out to Tony? Could the greatest basketball player in the world really be helping his former bully? Sam knew there was only one way to find out, and that was to dig deeper. He had a feeling that this story would be one for the ages, one that would show a side of Michael Jordan the world had never seen before. And so, the journey began. Sam couldn't shake the feeling that he was on the edge of something bigger than he'd anticipated. He had always been a journalist who chased the hard facts, but this story felt different. It was more than just another piece about the homeless in downtown Atlanta. It was about redemption, guilt, and the tangled history between a man who had everything and one who lost it all. As he continued to think about his conversation with Tony, something kept nagging at him. What had Michael Jordan, the legendary basketball player, been doing behind the scenes? Sam decided to track down Jordan's team. It took a few calls, a couple of dead ends, and a couple of well-placed favors, but he finally got a tip from someone who worked closely with MJ's foundation. It wasn't much, but it was enough to make Sam feel like he was on the right track. The next day, Sam found himself outside an exclusive event in downtown Atlanta, a charity gala for MJ's foundation. The guest list was tight, but Sam managed to get in, dressed in his best suit, as inconspicuously as possible. He wasn't there to mingle with celebrities, he was there for one reason, Michael Jordan. The gala was buzzing with excitement. Lights gleamed off the polished floors, and the air was filled with the soft murmur of high society chatter. But Sam had only one goal in mind. He waited, watching the doors, his eyes scanning the crowd. After what felt like hours, MJ finally made his entrance, surrounded by bodyguards and a small entourage. It was impossible to miss him. He looked just like the legends on TV, but this wasn't a moment about his basketball career, it was about what he was doing now. Sam moved quickly, making his way toward MJ, weaving through the crowd until he stood just a few feet away. He wasn't sure how this would play out, but he couldn't let the opportunity slip. He took a deep breath and approached him. Mr. Jordan, Sam said, his voice calm but firm. I've been looking into someone you might know, Tony Matthews. MJ stopped mid-stride, his eyes briefly scanning Sam's face. There was a moment of recognition, but it quickly turned to indifference. I don't know anyone by that name, MJ said flatly, his voice cool. If you're trying to get a story, you've come to the wrong place. But Sam wasn't backing down. You know him, Mr. Jordan. High school, North Carolina. Tony Matthews, he was the one who made your life miserable back then, bullied you every chance he got. For a brief moment, MJ's gaze softened, but he didn't speak. Instead, he motioned for his security team to move the conversation away from the public eye. Sam followed, keeping his distance, as they moved to a quieter part of the venue, away from prying ears. All right, MJ finally said. I know who you're talking about. His voice was lower now, guarded. But why are you asking about him? That was a lifetime ago. What's he got to do with me now? I found him, Sam said, his voice steady. He's living on the streets. homeless. And from what I understand, his life fell apart after everything he did to you. MJ took a slow breath, clearly conflicted. Tony's life isn't my problem. I've moved on from that. We all have. Sam pressed on. But that's not the full story, is it? Something's happening now, something behind the scenes. I've heard whispers that you're involved. That you've helped him in ways no one else knows about. MJ didn't respond right away. He stared at Sam for a long moment, as if weighing the situation, before finally speaking again. I don't do things for the press. Not everything needs to be public, and not every act of kindness should be a headline. What I've done for Tony, it stays between us. That's all you need to know. Sam, sensing the weight of the situation, nodded. I understand, but people deserve to know the truth. They deserve to know that redemption is possible, even for someone who was once a bully. Your gesture, whatever it was, might be the thing that changes everything for him. MJ looked at him again, his eyes softer this time. You want the truth? The truth is, Tony might have been a bully. He might have hurt me back then. But what matters now is what we do with that pain. I know what it feels like to be pushed down, to be underestimated. But I also know what it feels like to rise. Tony's been knocked down harder than anyone I've ever seen. That's why I'm helping him, because sometimes the people who hurt you the most are the ones who need help the most. Sam stood silently for a moment, processing MJ's words. He had expected a different answer, one that was more guarded, more about his image. But this wasn't about that. This was about something deeper, something more personal than he had anticipated. You've been helping him? Sam asked, finally breaking the silence. Without anyone knowing? Yes, MJ said, his voice firm. I don't want anyone to know. I don't want to be a hero. I just want Tony to find his way back. He doesn't need fame. He doesn't need attention. He needs a second chance. Sam was struck by the quiet intensity in MJ's voice. This wasn't about redemption for Jordan. It was about redemption for Tony, something no one would have expected from a man who had been humiliated by Tony so many years ago. Sam realized that the story he was about to tell was bigger than a headline. It was a lesson in compassion, in the possibility of change, and in the power of forgiveness. MJ's voice softened again. You don't need to write about it. But if you do, tell people that not every story needs an audience. Some stories are meant to be told quietly, when no one is watching. With that, MJ turned and walked away, blending back into the crowd. Sam stood there, speechless for a moment. He had come to uncover a scandal, but instead, he had uncovered a side of Michael Jordan that the world had never seen. A side that was about healing, not headlines. About second chances, not grudges. As Sam left the gala, his mind raced. This wasn't just about a journalist uncovering a story, it was about finding the humanity in a world that so often overlooked it. He had a decision to make. Would he share MJ's quiet acts of kindness with the world, or would he respect the silence, just as MJ had requested? But one thing was clear, this wasn't a story anyone could ignore. The days after the gala felt like a whirlwind for Sam. He had the story of a lifetime, one that wasn't just about a fallen celebrity or a sensational headline. It was about the redemption of a man who had once humiliated the greatest basketball player of all time, and now, in the quietest of ways, Michael Jordan was doing something extraordinary for him. But the decision weighed heavily on Sam. Should he break the story, exposing the depths of Jordan's kindness, or should he respect the privacy that MJ had asked for? Sam wrestled with the moral dilemma. The journalist in him yearned to tell the world about the incredible act of humanity he had uncovered. The world deserved to know that redemption was possible, that even the most broken people could rebuild themselves. But Jordan had made it clear that this act wasn't for fame or recognition. It was personal, and it was for Tony. There was no easy answer. Over the next week, Sam continued his investigation, reaching out to sources who had been close to Tony Matthews. He learned more about Tony's struggle, how his life had spiraled into addiction and homelessness, and how, despite everything, he had never forgotten the bullying he had subjected MJ to. But even with all this new information, Sam found himself conflicted. He couldn't deny the truth that was staring him in the face. Michael Jordan had given Tony Matthews something no one else had, the chance to start over. One afternoon, as Sam sat at his desk, the phone rang. He almost didn't pick it up at first, but something told him he needed to. It was Tony. "Sam, it's Tony," the voice on the other end crackled, and Sam could barely recognize the man who had been so cold and distant just days earlier. There was something softer in his voice now, something that spoke of change. "I wanted to thank you. For everything." "Thank me?" Sam asked, confused. "I didn't do anything. You gave me the chance to see myself. You didn't let me hide behind excuses or my past. You pushed me to face who I was, and who I could become," Tony continued. "But there's something I need to tell you. I don't want anyone to know what Michael's done for me. Not the world. Not the press. I just want to get back on my feet. And if you write about it, you might ruin that." Sam was silent for a moment, considering Tony's words. He knew that Tony had been through a lot, and he knew that whatever MJ had done, it was in private, away from the public eye. This wasn't about Tony's shame anymore, it was about Tony's dignity. The man who had bullied Jordan had finally found redemption, not in the spotlight, but in the quiet corners of life, where second chances are earned, not given to those who seek fame. "I understand," Sam finally said. "I won't write about it." There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then Tony spoke again, his voice almost shaky. "Thank you, Sam. And tell Michael, tell him I'll never forget this." "I will," Sam promised, though he wasn't sure how he would get the message to MJ. He didn't need to, though. He knew that the story wasn't about what the world thought or how it would play out in the media. It was about Tony, and it was about Michael. The fact that MJ had taken the time to help Tony meant everything to both of them. As the days passed, Sam continued to follow Tony's progress. He found a job working as a janitor at a local gym, where he slowly started to rebuild his life. His new employer was understanding and gave him the chance to prove himself. In the quietest way possible, Tony had begun to work his way out of the hole he had fallen into. But then, something extraordinary happened. A few months later, Sam received an unexpected call from Tony. "Sam, you won't believe this, but I'm coaching kids. I'm helping out at a local community center, teaching basketball to young kids. I don't even know how I ended up here, but I feel like I'm doing something that matters." Sam couldn't help but smile. It wasn't the fame or the fortune, but the simple fact that Tony was making something positive out of his life again. The man who had once tormented Michael Jordan was now helping kids learn the sport he had once loved so much, teaching them lessons that transcended basketball. It wasn't about winning or losing, it was about finding purpose. Sam had his answer. The story he had uncovered wasn't about exposing a secret act of charity. It was about understanding the power of second chances. He had learned that redemption wasn't something that happened in front of a camera, it happened in the quiet moments, behind closed doors, when no one was watching. Tony Matthews never became famous again. He never returned to the basketball courts of his youth, nor did he ever make it back to the limelight. But he found something more important than fame, he found peace. And through that peace, he began to help others, just as he had been helped. The bully had become a teacher, the man who had once crushed dreams now lifting others up. And as for Michael Jordan, his quiet acts of kindness remained just that, quiet. Sam could have written the story, could have exposed the world to MJ's humanity. But he chose to leave it unsaid, to honor the privacy that had meant so much to both of them. Sometimes, the most powerful stories are the ones left untold. The final twist came when, at a charity game organized by MJ's foundation, Tony was invited to watch from the sidelines. He wasn't a player, and he wasn't in the spotlight. But as he sat there, watching the game unfold, he realized that his life had come full circle. He had been given a chance to change, and now he was giving that same chance to others. Michael Jordan, in his quiet way, had given him the greatest gift of all, the opportunity to be more than just a past mistake. And that, in the end, was enough.